This
specialist working
conference will now be recorded.
with youth and young adults, and also supervising people who were working as peer support specialists, both in wraparound and in drop-in center settings. So working with a variety of young adults who have different needs, whether it be related to mental health, child welfare, juvenile justice, homelessness, all sorts of things. As a peer support specialist, I know that we don't really need to tell you all, but I have lived experience as a young adult in the mental health system, particularly as a young adult who experienced multiple misdiagnoses and then also trying to seek services sort of in that really fun transition age when nobody really knows what to do with you. And I did not have the benefit of a peer support specialist. But luckily had some pretty great advocates in my life, which was helpful. So super passionate about peer support, about helping young adults in that journey and really helping them not just navigate systems, but figure out how they can advocate for themselves and really learn that their voice is valuable. And, thank you, Ashley. Ashley says, yay, cats.
I agree.
That the sentiment is the same for everyone, but it's okay if you don't want to talk about it yet. So next up, we just have a few questions about who you all are. I think it was mentioned in the emails that we sent out. We really want this to not just be us disseminating information, but a good opportunity for youth peer support specialists to kind of get together and talk a little bit about their role. I know that when I was first starting as a youth wraparound support partner, I was in a huge county, and it was me and one other person who were doing youth peer support. And we barely saw each other except for when we would show up at these consultation meetings that would happen once a week with 15 care coordinators. And it just felt kind of isolating. So based off of that experience and having supervised youth peers who I know were also pretty geographically isolated and then working with a lot of other professionals who maybe had some misunderstandings of their role, we really want to create kind of a community here where people feel like they are comfortable talking a little bit about maybe some of the barriers that they're experiencing, some of the cool things that they experience, and being able to talk to this group about general things related to the role. That said, obviously, confidentiality is very important. Nothing that would be considered personal health information, but more like general concepts and problems, if that makes sense. Anyway, so now that I've done a lot of talking, we are really curious to know who you are. So please feel free to either speak up, or if you want to chat in, that is definitely encouraged as well. It looks like in the chat box, Catherine has introduced herself. She says, hello, my name is Catherine McCarthy. I work in Snohomish County in Washington as a youth partner on wraparound teams. I'm hoping to learn how to gain respect as a peer while also having a healthy rapport. Heck yeah, girl.
Yes.
Yes, I think that is a real struggle a lot of the times with youth peer support is how do you gain respect with other providers while still keeping rapport with them and with your young people. Would anybody else like to introduce themselves?
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Julianne Gale, and I am a youth engagement specialist, which is another way of saying youth partner. And I'm in Washington State, and I think I'm really interested in learning how to have my voice respected and kind of end adultism, because we are a youth-driven program, but sometimes I feel like adultism still sneaks through, and also how to help other people that I work with kind of understand the larger context for what we're looking at, including systems of racism and poverty and ableism and things like that.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. So kind of talking about not just how do you have your voice heard and respected and ending adultism, but looking at like how do we work within oppressive systems and how do we work to change those systems for the young people that we're working with.
Yeah, like how do we not just socialize the young people that we're working with into fitting into oppression? I would rather go deeper, and I would rather work with other practitioners, including the therapists and the care coordinators and all that, and the supervisors in understanding that kind of mindset.
Absolutely.
Hi, I didn't want to interrupt anybody. So I'm Ashley Monroe, and I work in Spokane, Washington at an agency called Passages Family Support, and I have done general outpatient youth peer support, and the last year and a half I've done WISE wraparound. I think one thing I'm really hoping to get out of this is truly understanding the difference between like where the line is with therapy and peer support. My agency really respects peers, and I sometimes feel like we're pushed more into that clinical role, which I think is beneficial, but I have had a hard time truly understanding where do we draw the line. Obviously there's certain subjects, but just having a better understanding of how to make that clear both to the families I work with and the youth I work with and then other providers I work with.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that that's a really important one. And we oftentimes see young adult peers taking on like a clinical or even like crisis intervention role. And it can be not only stressful for youth peers, but confusing for youth and their families on like what's the line there. So I think that that's a great one. It looks like we have 3 other folks on the line who haven't introduced themselves yet. Would anybody else like to go?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I did it. Sorry, I was having some challenges with my headphones. My name is also Ashley. I also work at Passages Family Support over here in Spokane, Washington. I'm really hoping to kind of maybe learn how to bridge that gap between focusing on a youth's mental health challenges and their want to just kind of vent all the time about anything. I'm always trying to bring it back to, their recovery plan. However, I think sometimes they see me and they really just want to like gossip about what happened at school. And I'm just like, no, we got to talk about something a little bit more serious than someone stealing your pen.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I know I definitely had the experience working with young people where we would get together and they would definitely be like, oh, you're like my BFF, so let's talk about this. And kind of having to set those boundaries of like, hey, totally down to gossip and like can't be your best friend, and there are some things that we've got to work on here. I think that that's like the perpetual problem that youth peers experience, because typically we're all people who kind of enjoy being around young people and near peers and like want to maintain that rapport, but also know that there are certain things that like we need to help them accomplish. Yeah, exactly. Is there anybody else who would like to introduce themselves? I don't want to put anybody on the spot, so if you don't want to, that's totally fine.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, my name's Erin Zenka. I use they, them pronouns, just as a heads up. I'm the program coordinator with the Living Room, and we're in Clackamas County in Oregon. And I think that I'm really, we're a youth peer support specialist like organization, and I'm kind of interested in learning skills around working with adults in the organization that are on the level, but maybe not quite as much as they need to be. Just kind of like with adults who are in the organization who aren't as adultist as maybe some other like adults in the community would be, but still aren't quite there with making our youth feel as welcome as they should be.
Totally. So like helping to learn maybe some of those things about what it really means to like be youth driven and what does that look like? Because I think that we all talk about that in principle, and then people are like, yeah, I'm totally youth driven, and then we see them do things where we're like, what are you doing? Like, stop doing that.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think that that's a really, really good example. And yeah, I think that a lot of these things we'll be able to get to today, but there's a lot to cover here, right? So there are things that hopefully, as we continue with this community of practice, we can sort of add to our list and decide what do we want to learn about and work on some of those things together. So thank you, everybody, for sharing. So just real quick, the goals behind this training series is to really, as we mentioned before, create a community of youth peers in order to build up and sustain peer support in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Alaska. We do anticipate that this group will get bigger. Originally, we had 13 registrants, and we have 6 people who are on today. Again, we know that crisis happens in this job, so we will always have recordings that you guys can watch afterwards. We will do monthly 1-hour sessions, and if as we mentioned, there will always be a recording. There's also going to be monthly like little assignments, for lack of a better word. Usually it's something fun, like we'll send out a comic, or you saw that we sent out the video before. We're also going to try and incorporate those things into our presentation. So we're going to try and watch the video today, but just in case there's technical difficulties, you guys have it. And then we always have discussions and things like that and encourage people to jump in. Oh, awesome. So Ashley just chatted into the chat box. She said, I'm super excited to have other youth peers here. Such a great feeling as I'm usually the only youth peer in a training. Yes, totally. And a lot of the times the training will seem a little oppressive, possibly. I know that I've been in trainings where I'm the only youth peer, and people are talking about young people in a way where I'm like, I think that if your young people were in the room, you would be speaking a little bit differently. And it can be hard to be the only person in that room that, A, holds your role, and then B, sort of has to advocate for this culture change that we need to see in a lot of our systems. So we're hoping here that this can be a really safe space where people can share about some of the things that they're experiencing in their work, and nobody feels particularly judged when they do so.
So learning objectives for today include learning more about being youth-driven, incorporating peerness, and clarifying the youth peer support goals. So a lot of what kind of was talked about already, we're going to go more in depth about in just a few seconds.
Now.
So this next discussion, what are some parts of your role that other professionals may not understand? And again, feel free to jump in either by phone or read out whatever's in chat.
Ashley says, I'm not another therapist. Totally. And then Catherine shared that there are 2 of them there, and that their mic isn't working. I'm sorry about that, Catherine, but thank you for using the chat. So we also have Katyana. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Katyana? Yes, we are not tutors or glorified babysitters. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, or cab drivers. Oh my gosh.
I don't have a magic wand that fixes a particular behavior. Yeah, and it's not not your job to fix behavior either, right?
And it is not your job to enforce adult standards.
You people get me. Good. I'm loving this group already.
Seriously.
Yeah, not your job to enforce adult standards, not your job to police the young person. Also, it's not your job to, like,
bridge the gap.
Or, like, exploit your own experience a lot of the time. Something that I experienced as, like, a new youth peer support is professionals would meet me and essentially be like, what's your trauma? And I didn't realize at the time that I could say no to sharing that. So I think, yeah, all of these things are super validating. Oh, hi, Savannah. Thank you for joining us. Savannah just chatted in. She just joined and is already loving the conversation. And, oh, yes, Erin, I love we can't speak for all youth ever. There were so many times where I know, especially doing like wraparound trainings around the state of Oregon and Washington, where people would be like, oh, yes, and we have a youth in the room. Now, here's Caitlin. And be like, okay, well, hold up. Like, I'm the only young person here. Also, I'm in my 20s. Like, a lot of the young people that you're serving are in their adolescence or their teens, and having a youth peer support represent all youth is super tokenizing. So let's not. Let's not do that. I think that these are all really, really relevant pieces. Are there any other parts of your role that professionals might not understand? Yeah, your role is different from family partners. You're not just like a family partner for the young person. And the young person, the youth peer support role looks really different and typically I think is dealing with a lot more like interpersonal crisis-related issues with the youth too. I know another one that I experienced a lot was people would basically think that my job entailed like hanging out with youth and eating froyo all day. I was like, what do you think I do?
I had working with my youth used as a almost as a punishment of like, you can't meet with your peer support, you're grounded. And it's like, wait a second, still a professional.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like Savannah just chatted into the chat box that secondary trauma that happens during the job cannot be supported. Yeah, totally. One thing that we, and actually Mary Beth and I talked about doing this as a part of this community of practice, but we don't talk a lot about the vicarious trauma that happens to youth peer support partners on the job. And we don't talk about the reality that like this is a difficult job where you're going to be experiencing some re-traumatization probably, you know?
Yeah.
And how do you have an organization that supports you in that and make sure that you have a self-care plan, a safety plan, all of that. So it sounds like you guys are honestly pretty advanced. So some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, you might be like, yeah, LOL, got that. But that's good for us to know so that as we continue doing these communities of practice, we're focusing on some of those higher level topics. Before we move on to the next piece, is there anything that folks want to add? I'm paid less than any other person on the WISE team, and it seems like people sometimes forget that too. Yes, Julianne, like people will, and they kind of expect you to like fill all of these gaps and forget that like peer supports are not treated equitably within their organizations. Even though we talk about how it should be equitable all the time, there's a real lack of equity there. And people sometimes, too, assume, like, oh, well, like, why can't you take the youth to buy them school supplies? And it's like, unless the youth is going to come with their own money or money from their guardians or whatever, like, I can't foot the bill for that. I know that that happened to me a couple of times. So, yeah, I think that that organizational equity is a huge problem. Okay. So the next piece that we're going to hop in on, and you guys please feel free to like jump in with your own comments because I think that you all probably know a lot about this. So we're going to talk about being youth-driven. So really, we know that the tenets are youth are their own best experts and capable of making decisions. Youth's voice should be solicited and prioritized during all parts of their treatment planning. So it's not just about being like, oh, you know, little Billy, how do you feel about that? But really taking whatever little Billy might say and prioritizing that as a strategy to meet a need. And then youth peer support providers that should use conversational techniques, which I think that you guys are probably all really good at, that help youth develop their own ideas and advocate that other professionals do the same thing. So I know that one thing that was hard for me that ended up being pretty rewarding, I think, for a lot of young people was when we saw professionals lecturing youth to really kind of intercept that. So it looks like we have a couple chats in the chat box. One thing that came up is peer supports versus youth peers. There's been a huge issue around here around there being an issue where youth peers aren't even seen. Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I think that a lot of the times people just tokenize the role to a point where, like, youth peers are not valued. Even if people are like hiring people in this role or asking people to be a youth peer in some sort of capacity, and that ends up basically like, you know, kind of perpetuating some of the systemic oppression that our youth and that peers have already felt, it's actually more harmful than good. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, Savannah. So something related to being youth-driven that we have here is this concept that we use called guiding without leading. So just because we are advocating for youth to use their own voice doesn't mean that youth always have like the confidence in doing that. I know that I worked with a lot of young people who are just like, I don't want to make decisions. I'm in crisis, number one, like, LOL, I'm not, like, in the best place to make decisions for myself right now. And number two, whatever I say, my team is just going to shut down anyway.
Right. You get beat up enough by a system, you don't want to participate in it.
Yeah, totally. And so I think that when we talk about guiding without leading, what we're really talking about is how do you ask questions or prompt youth to share their ideas without telling them what to do,
or
but still
influencing in the too much.
Yeah, totally. Without influencing their decision, but still like really providing a little bit of structure, for lack of a better way to put it, to prompt them to come up with those ideas. I know for me, if somebody had come to me, well, when people did come to me and say like, you know, what do you want to do, or can you make these decisions for yourself when I was in a hospital bed, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not in a place to do this right now. So guiding without leading is an important concept that we think about developmentally for young people about, like, where are they right now, or how are they ready to make decisions, and if they're in a space where they need some more assistance with that, how do we still do that without making decisions for them?
So this next part is peerness, and a couple of things that come up when we're talking about peerness is kind of making sure that a flexible structure is available so that you can create boundaries with your youth as a peer support specialist, but also have that conversational piece so that, you know, you can get the gossip in if that's what they want to talk about, but also you do that work that you want to, that you're there to work on. And then that also includes practicing strategic sharing in a way that's youth-driven. It helps to help with building hope without telling them how to do something or who to be, or basically leading them too much. You also want to be able to normalize the young person's experiences with shared understanding. That's the main thing I think that peerness is really recognizing that, like, other people have been in similar situations and you are one of them, and you understand some of the struggles. Obviously not all, like, no two experiences are the same, but having that shared understanding just can help a person feel heard a lot better than somebody who has no idea what they're talking about and is like, I know how to fix this kind of BS. Sorry. Peerness also relates to understanding youth culture, being closer in age, and understanding the youth's unique perspective. So youth culture, that's anything from the newest video games that are out, YouTube, or recognizing pop culture when it's talked about, and like words and just language that is used, and it's a huge umbrella, but that's the basics of it.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious to know, I mean, because we have a really great group here. So does anybody here have sort of an example of how they use peerness in their work, whether that be through strategic sharing, normalizing, or even like how they create boundaries with their young people? That was always super hard for me. Does anybody care to share? So Julianne says that related to the last one, there's a bit of a struggle because she didn't grow up where she's working or grow up rurally, and 33 and working with ages 15 to 24. So sharing skills or tactics. Savannah, I would say skills or tactics is a good one. And Julianne, totally relate. I grew up in a huge city and ended up seeking services when I was about 18 in a more rural area, and then working with youth in a rural area. So I didn't connect with a lot of my rural youth on some of those things, and just kind of had to go with God a little bit, gun culture was a much bigger deal in the county that I worked in than where I grew up, and I was kind of astounded. I was like, what is this? And I think just showing that to my youth authentically and allowing them to understand that I sort of came from a different background was actually super helpful. And it allowed us to sort of build relationships based off of that, the new things that we were learning from each other and about each other. And then also, I mean, I'm 29. I lead youth groups still about twice a month, and I just let them make fun of me because I'm quote unquote old now. So I don't know if I think that having a youthy vibe is super helpful, and I've definitely met 21-year-olds who seem like they are 60 and 35-year-olds who seem like they're in their 20s. So I think that if you have that ability to connect with young people, that makes a huge difference rather than actually what is your numerical age.
Yeah.
And having a sense of humor about it. I got made fun of at this last youth group that I did because I was talking about how I use Bitmoji, and apparently everybody thought that I was an old fart for using Facebook and Bitmoji. And I was just I guess that I crossed the line now. I guess here we are. But
I'm 29 too, and I am officially 5 years older than the age of the person that I had as a near peer, who I called old. So, kind of at that old part too.
Yeah, I think as long as you have a good sense of humor about it, and also just you have, again, that youthy vibe, that's more important. It looks like here too we have Ashley who shared, I love the normalizing part of my job, and youth are frequently surprised to hear some of my experience because, quote, I don't look like I've experienced that. Yeah. I'm also not up to date on substance use and language around that, and I always make jokes about it and ask the youth to school me. Oh, yes, I love that strategy. So,
yes.
If you don't know about a thing, asking the youth to, school you and teach you about it is actually a really empowering experience for them, too, even if it's something small. I had a youth set up a Snapchat account for me, 5 years ago now. But even things like that, they're eager to show you. It teaches them that, you care about what they care about and what they know, and that you can learn from them. So I think that that's a super good strategy. Are there any other examples that folks can think of, or any other ways that people want to share how they use peerness in their work? Oh, and Ashley added, yeah, and empowers them as they are the expert in their lives. Yeah, absolutely.
For me, I had a young person that I worked with, and we ended up connecting over Minecraft and YouTube. This was in 2012. So, YouTube videos, weird random music videos that were on there, and talking about Minecraft, and because we both played it. And at one point, he ended up going through quite a bit of crisis in his life, and we were able to kind of use videos and Minecraft to talk about when he needed some like escape time because he had so many other adults in his life being like, you need to do this, you need to do that, and he didn't deal with them. He just dealt with me because I was able to pepper like some of the real talk that we had to do with like Minecraft jokes and calling other people old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes using, like that humor and kind of that youth culture piece to still get at like the more serious pieces that you're doing in your job. Are there any other examples that folks want to use? Whoa. All right, hold on. So Savannah shared, for me, it's about doing a lot of active listening and being intentionally vulnerable, doing activities that we both enjoy, that causes a full circle of having a good time, but allows for conversation. I also come in with that an agenda, heck yes, snaps, so that sometimes we can just be, teach me your ways. For me, it's a lot about being real and just being a person. Welcoming to the person land of Savannah, and let me connect you to your community and what you want to do in your life. I love it. I think that, the one thing about the peer role is it really asks you to be vulnerable and authentic in a way that allows you to connect on an interpersonal level while you're still like a professional provider for this youth.
Complex.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's like trying, so we'll definitely get into that with our communities of practice. And Julianne shared one of the ways that I am able to handle peerness in a way that others at my office could not is I'm a mixed person of color and have lived experience with racism. Yeah, all the therapists and RAP facilitators are white. And so I think that that's probably super important for connecting with young people who have a similar background, right? I know that I have worked with young people who have shared with me, like young people of color, they're like, dude, if I get like one more white provider, and it's because white people are never going to understand how like they experience racism on a daily basis. Yes. Like they can maybe try and understand it conceptually, but they're never, ever, ever going to understand that level of oppression. Catherine says that my youth actually have a lot of appreciation for when I engage in activities that they prefer. Absolutely. Savannah says lots of check-ins, and then Ashley P. shared, I feel like youth are expected to be adults, but then are put down by adults when they try.
Seriously.
Oh, yes. And then Savannah shared, I have different experience working with queer youth, different but also working on oppression. And Erin shared we're an LGBTQ specific, so we make lots of gay jokes and puns. Yep. I would do the same thing as somebody who identifies as queer when I was working with queer youth, and they were like specifically trying to connect to different drop-in centers or communities. Actually, Erin, I'm pretty sure I brought a lot of youth to the living room, so a little shout out there. But we would play this game where we'd be like, okay, so how many flags do we think we're gonna see when we go in? And being able to joke about subgroups and communities that you're a part of with your young person is super helpful, not just in building that rapport, but kind of helping them feel comfortable in forming their identity too. Erin, heck yes, yeah. And then Savannah, I love it, refocusing the voice on youth voice. And I also really love that it was identified that young people are often pressured by their team, I feel like, to share more, participate more, and then they do, and they kind of get shut down. Yeah. So when we talk about being youth-driven, it's not just about engaging the youth in that process, but kind of having to engage team members in that too, and what are ways that they need to shift their practice a little bit in order to appropriately involve youth voice. Yeah. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to the next piece, and this is where we have our video. So did everybody get the link to the video before? Okay. Well, and I want to say, so Ashley just said, Ashley M. just said, I love to joke about our struggles, but validating that we both get what it's like to have stigma and oppression. Super important. Yes. And I feel like that was true for all of the youth that I worked with, is like, yeah, we could kind of, honestly, Mary Beth and I just on a daily basis about like mental health struggles and stuff like that. Yeah. But also recognizing like how does that affect the way that you have to interact with others and move through the world and also like how do you like check in on each other and make sure that things are okay. And then additionally, you know, humor can also alleviate some of that like daily struggle that you have.
Definitely.
So like making fun of a little bit like the stigma and oppression that might be regularly experienced, but still taking it seriously.
Yes.
So Ashley P., you didn't receive the link. Thankfully, Ashley M. sent it to you. Cool. I love that. Well, we're going to try and watch it here today. We've had some difficulties with it previously, so I'm hoping that won't be the case. But if everybody could let me know, like, if you're having some trouble hearing the audio or if it's just really choppy, then we'll know for the future to send you the links ahead of time or to, like, work on our platform. But this should work. We tested it last week.
Hey, Nicholas, thanks for meeting with me today.
Yes, well, welcome.
How are you doing?
I am doing pretty great, honestly.
Cool.
Oh, whoops, that was my fault because I clicked on a thing. Sorry, everybody.
Thanks for meeting with me today.
Yes, well, welcome.
How are you doing?
I am doing pretty great, honestly.
Cool. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit about the process that we're doing today, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask me.
Yep.
So what this is called AMP Plus, and what that stands for is Achieve My Plan. And why it's important is, so, like, young people a lot of times aren't involved in their own planning process, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, like, they find that, like, when young people don't have a voice in their plan, they're not really successful, you know? Like, if their planning team just, like, keeps with their plan, it's not really going to work out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, so we, like, think, like, if you have a voice in making your own plan, that's going to work out a lot better, like, than if I just, like, gave you something and said, go do this, I think this will be successful for you.
Yeah, definitely. You feel like you're more obligated to do it than it is something you want to do.
Right. Instead of, like, if we explored, like, hey, what would work better for you, Jesus, based on, like, who you are, like, what you like to do. So, like, that's kind of, like, what this is about. So what we're going to do today is, like...
Oh, shoot. Sorry about that, guys. Here, we'll jump ahead a little bit.
We, like, think, like, if you have a voice... Right. Instead of, like, if we explored, like, hey, what would work better for you, Jesus, based on, like, who you are, like, what you like to do. Explore what some of your strengths are. We're going to do a dream wheel, which involves not really, like, making specific goals for your future, but just, like, looking at what kind of dreams you have, independent of, like, how you're going to get there necessarily, and then we're going to...
Okay, so, like, what my goals are, not necessarily what I dream about, right?
Yeah, like,
okay.
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Not like what, like, you dream about being asleep at night, but,
really,
like,
really
where you want to be in life, yeah. And then we're going to make, like, a few acts. Sound good?
Yeah.
Any questions or concerns about that? Cool. Okay, so we'll start off with the strengths exploration.
Oh boy.
How do you feel about that? Oh boy, sounds a little apprehensive.
Always when I think about like strength, it's kind of hard for me to like also some due to the fact that I always probably negative myself with person, but not.
Definitely.
But I mean, it's always cool to like put them on paper. We the whole perspective like, holy crap, maybe I don't suck.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can be really awkward to think about strengths sometimes because you feel like you're bragging about yourself or something too. And especially because what do you enjoy doing?
What do I enjoy doing?
Yeah.
Well, primarily, I enjoy playing video games
Yeah.
and or reading Japanese manga.
Oh, cool. M-A-N-G-A, right?
Yeah. Like manga, but without the O.
Yeah, cool. You read those, like, in paper form, or like?
I mean, both. Some of them are Barnes and Noble, just like sit there and read. But a lot of them are pretty inappropriate, so it's kind of like hard to read them.
In public?
Yeah, it's just like, and it comes with the weirdest moments too. So like over here they're talking, and then over here just spirals into something that's not what it seems like it is.
You're just like.
There's a old lady with some children behind her.
Yeah.
This does not look like what's actually happening. I think it's time I go.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, cool. Are those ones where like you read where it goes like from left to right on the page, or like right to left? I mean.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You sort of write that stuff down.
Like I feel like that'd be so confusing. Like,
You know, sometimes you'll see like comics that hold some like they kind of take reference from Japanese comics, but they're written from left to right.
Yeah.
So you're like, why does this dialogue make no sense?
Because you're expecting to read it.
No, you're like reading it right to left. You're like, what? And then you realize, like, oh, this was made here in America. That's why.
Yeah.
Cool. That's nice.
I feel like that's a skill to learn to read in the other direction, because that would just wrinkle my brain entirely.
I mean, when you're reading in paper form, it's not as hard because you open it from the other side.
Oh, okay.
So
it's like a
It's
backwards
a lot easier. But when you're reading it, like the first time you're reading it online, like the whole digital format,
Yeah.
you can put that really well.
Yeah,
And
totally.
Then you totally don't know if it's American or not.
Yeah.
You're like Korean ones are also right, left to right.
Yeah.
So like.
You just have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Ahead of time.
You gotta pay really close attention to that one and make sure it sounds proper.
Yeah. Interesting. I was wondering about that. Okay, so what else do you enjoy doing? Manga, video games?
I enjoy.
There we go.
Okay, so did everybody hear and see that okay? Perfect. So I really like using that example, number one, because it features two people who are very dear to me, so that's always really nice, you know. But additionally, I think it's a really good example of how peers kind of use different like conversational techniques and relate to youth in a different way, yet still get shit done, you know, like, so their names are Maria and Jesus. Maria is clearly like still working on strengths exploration, but she's not doing it in a clinical way where she's like, okay, like, let's list your strengths. This isn't weird. Yeah, you know. So, and they're still able to like talk about those things and pull them out while having a real conversation about things that Jesus is passionate about. So when you're looking at this video, what are some of the techniques that you notice the peer support provider using? How does this look different from practice as usual? And what do you feel like is different about their relationship rather than maybe the relationship that the youth might have with like a clinician or a different professional? Or additionally, if there's anything that you would have done differently, like what does that look like? So Catherine shared a lot of validating. Yeah, totally. I like the instance where when the young person says like, oh boy, because they're nervous about the strengths exploration, that there's a lot of normalizing and validating about like, heck yeah, talking about strengths can be weird. Lots of open-ended questions. Yes, the open-ended questions are our favorite, almost to like an annoying extent, because we talk about them all the time, but they're really important. Language is casual, casually dressed, listening, reassurance, absolutely. Mirroring the youth's voice and tone, not clinical sounding. And questions asked in additional info related to something the youth was interested in. Yeah, I see a lot of the time that we'll work with providers who I think like really have good intentions and want to build rapport with young people. But the minute that the young person brings up something like, oh, I like manga, they're like, cool, next.
What's
like,
the strength of yours?
Yeah, what else? Just like talk about manga with them for a little bit, dude. That's what they care about. Another one that we have here is, I do a lot of tell me more because sometimes an open-ended question won't lead to a conversation. Yeah, and sometimes open-ended questions too, like if you're like trying really hard to use them, can come out weird.
Funky.
Yeah, like I think that the best thing is like don't be weird and like just come at things with a genuine curiosity about what the young person is interested in. Cool. I love this discussion, you guys. This is my favorite. And Julianne shared, similarly to Savannah, I realize I need to sometimes ask yes or no questions rather than open-ended questions, or share a little bit about my interest to make it more casual, so it's not a quiz conversation, but a conversation. Yes. And I think a part of that, too, like incorporating humor is super important with young people. Like if you're coming in and you're just being like real professional and dry, it feels not just like a little scary, but boring, right?
I always build in enthusiasm too. That's always my secret weapon. I'm a little bit bubbly, and I like to use that to try to get other people to connect as well.
I think that's exactly. And that's a genuine part of your personality, So if you're not bubbly, totally fine.
Don't build in bubbly if you're not bubbly.
Yeah, be authentically who you are and just like ask questions that because you're genuinely curious about the young person and what they're interested in. Are there any others that folks want to share? Okie doke. Well, this next piece we're kind of going to, unfortunately, have to rush through. This is based off of the worksheet. Well, I guess it's not a worksheet, whatever, the handout that was emailed earlier in the week, really just like clarifying the peer support role. Luckily, you guys also seem like to already know a lot of this, and even earlier in our discussion, some of these came up, like not a babysitter, not a cab driver.
Yeah, and you can find some validation in this too. You're not the only one being like, I shouldn't be doing this. You really shouldn't be. Like that kind of a thing. So that's also a part of this.
So we'll talk about some of these, and if there are some of these that you guys want to highlight later in some of our presentations, we can definitely do that. So if there are ones that we mentioned here where you're like, oh, that seems real interesting and I'd like to go more in depth on that, let us know and we can make sure that those are a focus for next time. So as we know, there's often misunderstandings about youth peer support. As a result, youth peer support specialists are often expected to do things that are sort of outside of their role. And this contributes to burnout, confusion, fatigue, general frustration and annoyance with the world. So it's really important that these things are clarified, which is why we created this document that is free for use on our website. And I find that the people who usually need it most are other providers and or family members of the youth that you're working with. So feel free to print it out and hand it to people when you meet with them and you're like, here you go. Yeah, leave it around. Exactly. So real quick, what are some things that you've been asked to do by youth, families, or professionals that are outside of your role? Oh, geez, sorry. I was like waiting for people to chat in, and it looks like there's a whole conversation going on here. Is there a link to access this? Yes. So Ashley, I'll go ahead and send out the link afterwards, as well as include the attachment again. Excellent. And sorry that I totally missed all of this discussion that's going on, you guys. This is fantastic. For the sake of time, I think that we'll just move on to this next discussion piece. So if there's anything that you've been asked to do that are outside of your role, feel free to share that. I'm sure that we've all had that experience. And we have a couple of examples that come up in this document. So the things that you're supposed to do, and I think that we all know this, so we'll kind of breeze through this piece, but a big part of it is building hope, and the way that you do that is strategic sharing. So sharing parts of your story that only you are comfortable sharing, because you do not need to like pimp out your story for people.
No.
And really it's about also making sure that it's helping the young person, right?
It's relevant.
Yeah, so if we're playing Trauma Olympics, it's not going to be super helpful. But if it's something that like helps normalize, that helps them feel less alone, and helps them build hope, super, super helpful. Oh, Ashley, totally. So we're looking now at like, what have you been asked to do? Enroll youth in services, find them housing, pick up prescriptions, make them stop doing that. Yes. Julianne shared working with youth on sexual boundaries. Yeah, because the therapist didn't want to, and mom complained to the family partner about the youth coming home with hickeys. So like basically people like oftentimes using the youth peer support partner as a conduit for their own work.
Mm-hmm.
Super aggravating.
Yes.
So some of the other things that happen in this role, being shared understanding, affirmation, destigmatizing, right? So, which I always found kind of hard, because I was like, I still feel like I get tokenized and stigmatized a lot. But like really helping the young person understand that there are people there who, have had similar struggles, and it doesn't mean that, they aren't worth listening to, that they can't be professional, that they can't be good advocates, you know?
Well, and it comes back to what was mentioned earlier. So, like, you don't look like you've experienced that.
Totally.
And so pulling some of the stigma away from those experiences can help.
Yeah. Relationship building, individualized support, being a big part of the role. Now here's the juicy stuff. Common misconceptions. So a lot of people assume, and this was kind of brought up earlier, like you don't have a magic wand that fixes everything.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be a superhero. You're not, like, just because you're a part of the team doesn't mean that all of a sudden, like, you know all of the answers. That's not how it works. Additionally, you shouldn't be the only person doing crisis response, which I know was something that I experienced a lot. And so if you guys are having that experience, we would be happy to kind of talk more about, like, how do you develop a crisis plan with youth and make sure that other team members are accountable for it too. You're not their therapist. I know that came up earlier.
Yes.
Like, what is that line between being their therapist and not? You're definitely there as emotional support, but like you're not a clinician who's making clinical decisions, right? So you can share a little bit about maybe your own experiences with therapy or things that you know have worked for other people, but like to make a clinical recommendation is not going to be helpful. Really, it's up to the young person what they want to do. You're not there to tell them what to do. We've already heard a lot about this. You're not there to change behavior. You're not there to, like, quote, make them stop doing that.
Right.
I love it. Yeah, you are not, like, there to monitor them. That's not your job. You're also not there to be their spokesperson. You're there to help them speak up for themselves. And if they want you to speak up for them, fine, great, fantastic, whatever. But, like, oftentimes I know that when I was a youth peer support specialist, people would come to me outside of the team and be like, what does the youth think about this? And I'd be like, why don't you call the young person and ask them, you know? So, yeah, it's not your job to speak up for them all of the time or be the only resource. I know, so it sounds like this was just shared, but, like, having to do everything in your role, basically, like, run all their errands, enroll them in services, find them housing, like, it's not your job to do everything.
No.
You are not the catch-all. It's your job to help youth, like, really gain self-determination skills, think about how they want to advocate for themselves in their meetings, or, like, find their voice. And, yeah, help connect them to some resources related to goals that you guys might be working on, but you're not supposed to do all of the things. And I think that sometimes people just assume that you have the time to do it,
right.
which is also, bad. Not your job to be the star. I'm not really worried about you guys doing that, but there were times where I know that when I was a supervisor, we had usually people who were pretty new to the role and didn't understand strategic sharing would just, like, shared all of their story all of the time, and I would be like, oh, whoa, sis, like, you might be re-traumatizing some people. Let's talk a little bit more about that. But I think that you guys seem pretty advanced. Also, yeah, this came up earlier. Don't be their cab driver. That's not like your job. It's not your job to transport the youth.
Like, yes, you might go places together, but you are not taking a young person to a place specifically just to take them to the place that they need to go to.
Exactly. You're not their babysitter. You're not their best friend. I mean, I know it's hard. We build these relationships. They're really meaningful. But also it's important that we're helping young people, like, build the capacity to go and make friends on their own.
Have their own natural supports.
And then not their job to police them. It's not your job to, quote, make them stop doing that. I love that quote. Yeah, not it at all. So I know that we went through that pretty quickly, but like I said, if there's any pieces of either what does a youth peer support do or what do they not do that you guys want to review more in depth, go ahead and shoot us an email or drop it in the chat box, and we'll make sure to sort of like tailor some of these things around that.
Definitely.
So wrap up discussion. I think what we're really interested in, we know that we're a little over time, is what do you guys want to focus on next time? Like, this is really for you, your community of practice. We want you to build this. So are there any like particular things that stand out to you that you really want to talk about? Oh, biggest takeaway is feeling less alone and facing the challenges I face. Julianne, me too. Ashley, yeah, not being their therapist is something to explore further. So I definitely think that we can like carve out some time for next time to really talk about that and talk about like how do we explore that with team members? How do we explore that with the youth? Like, what do these conversations look like? Yeah, exactly. Okay, and then other ones that we have here, increasing engagement. Youth are burnt out of the system. Heck yeah. Or not ready to work on recovery. I think that that's a big one that we see a lot too, is like young people are traumatized and tired of the systems that they're involved in. Figuring out coordination and communication with therapists.
Definitely how to support the young person in that.
Boundaries between being supportive, friendly, and being a friend. I think that's a really good one that we can talk about next time too. Reinforcing boundaries without being authoritarian. Yeah, and then how do you get them to kind of like you want to keep that engagement but still work on the work. Yeah, so you can get them to meet with you but not work on work, and then the rest of the team wants to discharge. So how do you advocate for them still remaining in the services that they might want to be a part of, but they're not like really ready to do some of the quote work yet. These are all really important ones, you guys. And sorry, I'm annoyed with myself. I keep on saying you guys, and I'm trying to like not use that term. Yeah, because it's a super gendered term. So feel free to call me out every time you do it. Like sometimes I catch myself and sometimes I don't. But, that's okay. Cool. Well, I think that these are all things that I'll send up a follow-up. I'll make these are all things that are like we're hearing accurately. Yes, Savannah, folks, people, y'all, yeah. And then maybe decide what are some of the things that we want to work on for next time. I definitely think that boundary between being a therapist and also how do you set healthy boundaries while still being identifying a member of their friend group is important stuff. Is there anything else that folks would like to focus on in the next few months as we do these? Okay, cool. Well, feel free to email or get in touch with us at any time. Unionizing. All right, Julianne. Yeah, being talked down to by the therapist or really any other professional too, due to educational knowledge. webinar. Thanks, Ashley. Well,
There's the cat picture.
thank you all. Here's a little Pusheen picture for the rest of your day. I'm sorry that we went over today. But our next session will be January 8th at 10 a.m. You'll get tons of reminders to me. Y'all are going to be really annoyed with me by the time we're done with this because I just like by email. But if there's ever anything that you guys want to, oh wait, 10 to 11. No, you're right, Julianne. It's going to be at 11. Sorry, that's so. But I'll send out a reminder to everybody and make sure that it has the correct time there. And if there's ever anything that you all want to discuss either with Mary Beth or I or amongst each other, we encourage you to do that. Additionally, on this training piece, Mary Beth and I have some extra TA hours, so feel free. Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah. So feel free to reach out. I'll include our phone numbers in the email wrap up that I sent to everybody. Before we wrap up, does anybody have any last questions or thoughts that they want to throw out there? It's at 11. Yeah, sorry everybody. I'll make sure that that gets clarified in the following email. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm super excited about this project. If there's other peers that you think would want to be a part of it, feel free to send my information to them or vice versa. And we are super excited to see you all in January. Have a great December.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.